It's a Tuesday when the envelope arrives. No stamp, no return address, just your name, printed in a font that hasn't been used since the early 2000s, in ink that smells faintly of somewhere cold. You almost throw it away. You've been throwing things away for years. Old habits, old contacts, the version of yourself that used to believe certain things about the world. But something stops your hand. Maybe instinct. Maybe the fact that nobody outside of 3 living people knows this address, and 2 of them are dead. Inside is a single card, cream-colored, government-weight paper, a 6-digit number, a time, and a symbol in the bottom right corner that makes your stomach drop through the floor. You recognize it immediately. You were trained to. It's the seal of the Directorate. Most people have never heard of the Directorate. The ones who have heard of it believe it was dissolved in 2004 following a Senate Oversight Committee that quietly buried its findings in a classified annex that has never been declassified and almost certainly never will be. The official story is clean, a Cold War-era intelligence coordination body, made redundant by restructuring, quietly wound down, its personnel absorbed into other agencies, its files transferred, its existence reduced to a footnote in a document nobody reads. The Wikipedia entry is 4 sentences long. There's a reason for that. You helped write it. The Directorate didn't die, it just stopped being visible. That is a very different thing. You show up to the location on the card at the time on the card. It's a parking structure in a mid-sized city that you've never had reason to visit. Level 4, Bay 17. A gray sedan is already there. Engine off, no plates. The window rolls down before you reach it. The man inside is older than you remember, but the eyes are the same. Flat, intelligent, carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has been watching things for a very long time. He says your old call sign, not your name, your call sign. You haven't heard it in 11 years. He says there's a situation. He says the word situation the way people in this work say it, which means something has gone badly wrong in a way that cannot be fixed through official channels. And the reason it cannot be fixed through official channels is that official channels are either compromised, unaware, or both. He says you were specifically requested. He says the request came from the director. You tell him the director is dead. There was a funeral. You attended it. You stood in the rain in a cemetery in Northern Virginia and watched a casket go into the ground, and you felt, genuinely felt, that a chapter of your life had finally closed. The man in the car looks at you for a long moment. He says the funeral was operational. You sit with that for the drive. The man, you knew him once as Harlan, which is almost certainly not his name, doesn't offer more. He drives with the focused quietness of someone who has given up on small talk as a concept. Outside the window, ordinary America moves past. A gas station, a school, a woman walking a dog in the pale morning light. You watch it all and feel the familiar sensation of sliding between worlds, of the visible surface of things peeling back to reveal the machinery underneath. You'd spent 11 years convincing yourself the machinery was behind you. The car takes you to a building that looks like a regional insurance office and smells inside like recycled air and old decisions. There are no signs. There are 2 men in the lobby who are clearly not receptionists, though they're sitting at a reception desk. You follow Harlan through a keypad that requires a door, down a staircase, through another door, into a room that has clearly been a room for a very long time, regardless of what the building above it has pretended to be. The director is sitting at a table. She looks exactly the same. That is the most unsettling thing about her. 11 years, a staged death, and whatever she's been doing in the space between, and she looks exactly the same. Composed, precise, watching you the way chess players watch the board. She says, "Welcome back. Sit down. We have about 40 minutes before you need to make a decision."
The situation, and you start to understand the weight of that word now, involves a treaty. Not a public treaty, not the kind that gets signed in front of cameras with flags in the background. A back-channel agreement negotiated in 1999 between the Directorate and a foreign intelligence service that, like the Directorate itself, was officially dissolved sometime later, under circumstances that were also not what they appeared to be. The agreement was simple in the way that agreements between shadow organizations are simple. Mutual non-interference, information sharing at specific intervals, and a shared protocol for a specific category of event. The category of event is occurring right now. A network, a real one, not a threat assessment, not a possibility, has been working for 3 years to surface documents that would not merely embarrass governments, but destabilize the specific invisible architecture that keeps certain catastrophic things from happening. You don't have a full picture yet. You're given enough to understand the shape of it. Someone inside a legitimate intelligence community has been feeding this network information, either knowingly or without understanding what they're part of. The network is close, weeks, maybe less. The Directorate cannot go through official channels because official channels are exactly what this network is monitoring. Any movement, any flag, any formal request would be seen. The foreign partner cannot act unilaterally without triggering other agreements that would cause their own exposure. The whole structure is balanced on the edge of a knife, and the only way to move without tipping it is to use people who don't officially exist, working for an organization that officially doesn't exist, under authorities that were officially revoked 20 years ago. That is where you come in.
You ask the obvious question. You ask why you, specifically. The director opens a folder and turns it towards you. Inside is a photograph. You know the man in the photograph. Not well, a brief professional overlap years ago, in a context you haven't thought about in a long time, but you know him. More importantly, and this is why you, specifically, he knows you. Not as an operator, not as a call sign. He knows a version of you that was constructed for exactly this kind of contingency, a legend so deep and so old that it has lived longer than most real relationships, and he trusts it. She says, "You're not going in cold. You're going in as someone he already believes in." You look at the photograph for a long time. You ask what happens if you say no. She says you go back to your life, Harlan drives you to a train station, and the envelope never existed. You ask what happens to the situation. She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, "Something worse than us tries to solve it." That is the answer you were afraid of. That is also, you realize, the answer that was designed to bring you back. Because in 11 years of walking away, the one thing you never stopped believing was that the alternative to imperfect systems run by imperfect people is not some clean and righteous vacuum. It's other imperfect systems run by worse people with less restraint. You've seen what those look like. You tell her you need 48 hours to close some things. She says you have 24. The work itself comes back to you the way physical memory does, not as thought, but as body. The particular alertness, the habit of cataloging exits, the way a conversation becomes a landscape you're moving through rather than an exchange you're having. You'd almost missed it, and the fact that you'd almost missed it tells you something uncomfortable about yourself that you file away and don't look at directly. Your contact, the man in the photograph, goes by a name you can't record here. You'll call him the architect, because that's what he is, someone who builds structures, information structures, systems of trust and leverage and mutual dependency, and who has spent decades believing he's building them in service of something good. He is not a bad man. That is the most complicated part of what you're about to do. He is a careful, intelligent, principled man who has been positioned over years so gradually he never noticed the positioning to be exactly where he is right now. You make contact through a channel that's so old it's invisible.
a message board for collectors of a specific kind of antique militaria, where certain users post certain things in a certain format that means nothing to anyone scrolling past and everything to the two people it's meant for. He responds within 6 hours. That's faster than you expected. That tells you something too. He wants to meet. The meeting is in a city in Central Europe that has layers to it the way geological formations have layers, each era of history compressed under the next, never fully replaced, just buried. You arrive 2 days early. You walk the city. You learn its patterns the way you were trained to learn places, not as geography, but as behavior, the rhythms of who moves where and when and why. You identify 12 potential problems and solve 11 of them before the meeting happens. The 12th you leave open. You need at least one variable you're not controlling. It keeps you honest. He arrives looking exactly like someone who has spent too long carrying something heavy. You recognize that posture from the inside. You sit across from him in a cafe that's been operating since the Habsburg era and order coffee that's better than anything you've had in years, and you talk. Not about what you're both there to talk about, not yet. About other things, about time, about the work, about whether any of it, across all the years, across all the decisions that couldn't be unmade, had been worth what it cost. He says something you don't expect. He says he's been waiting for contact from someone real for almost 2 years. He says everything around him has started to feel like a performance, like a stage set built to keep him moving in a particular direction, and he can't tell anymore which parts are genuine and which parts are architecture. You listen to him say this. You don't let anything cross your face. You think he's right. He just doesn't know who built it. It takes 4 meetings over 10 days. Each one goes deeper. Each one costs you more in the currency that this work always costs in, the compound interest of deception applied to a person who doesn't deserve it. He tells you things that confirm what the director briefed you on and reveal things she didn't. The network is larger than assessed. Its reach into legitimate institutions is more sophisticated than anyone understood. And the documents it's preparing to surface are not merely dangerous, they are specifically, surgically targeted at the invisible architecture in a way that could only have been designed by someone who knew exactly what that architecture was and what would happen if the right load-bearing piece was removed. Somebody gave them a blueprint. Somebody who understood the directorate's role in things. Somebody who knew the back-channel treaty existed. Somebody who had access to operational history going back far enough to understand where the pressure points were. You send an encrypted report. You wait. The response comes back in under an hour, which means she was waiting for it, which means she already suspected what you've just confirmed, which means you're not just running an operation, you're being run through one. That realization arrives quietly, the way the most important realizations always do. Not as a shock, but as a settling, a sudden stillness in the middle of everything moving. You're sitting in a hotel room in a city you can't name, with a cup of cold coffee and a view of a river. And you understand with the clean clarity of someone who has been in this long enough to recognize the shape of things from the inside, that you were returned to the directorate not because you were the best available option, but because of what bringing you back would do to you, to your relationship with the architect, to the legend you carry, to the specific sequence of events that needs to unfold in a specific way. You are a piece being moved. The question, and it's a question you've lived with before in different forms, in different operations, is whether the thing you're being moved toward is something you'd have chosen anyway. You think about the documents. You think about what surfaces if they do. You think about the invisible architecture and what it actually holds in place and what would rush in to fill the vacuum if it fell. You've seen the alternatives. You've worked adjacent to the alternatives in dark places that appear in no official record. You think about the architect, who is a good man in a machine he doesn't know he's in. You make a decision, not the one the director is expecting, not the one the operation was designed to produce, something in between, which is the only honest place left to operate from when the clean choices have all been removed. You meet the architect one final time. You don't tell him everything. You can't. And honestly, even here, at the edge of what you're willing to do, there are things he's better off not knowing. But you tell him enough. You tell him the part about the blueprint. You tell him the part about the pressure points. You tell him that someone built this around him specifically, and that whoever built it had access to information that should not exist, and that before he takes any further action, he needs to ask himself who benefits most from what he's about to do, and whether the answer to that question changes anything. He goes very still. He asks how he knows what he knows. You tell him that's a question he should sit with but not answer yet. He asks if he's been played. You tell him that everyone in this work has been played. The question is just by whom, and toward what end, and whether you finally understand the full picture, you can live with your part in it. He looks at you for a long time. The cafe is loud around you, the way European cafes are loud, full of ordinary life proceeding at ordinary volume, completely indifferent to what's happening at this particular table. He says, "Are you one of them?" You say, "I used to know the answer to that." You file a final report, partial, carefully partial. You confirm certain things, omit others, frame the assessment in a way that will send the operation in a direction that is not what was intended, but is, in your judgment, closer to what's actually necessary. It's a dangerous thing to do. It's also the only move left you can make without becoming something you won't be able to look at. There's no response this time, just silence, which is its own kind of answer. You check out of the hotel. You take a train to a different city. You sit by a window and watch the landscape change, and you think about the envelope, about the card, about the way the past never actually stays in the past. It just waits with the patience of something that doesn't need to breathe. Your phone buzzes once. Unknown number. A message containing only 4 words. The architect went dark. You don't know yet whether that means he listened, whether he ran, whether something found him first. You don't know whether what you did made things better or simply redistributed the damage. You don't know whether the director is furious or satisfied, or whether those two things in her calculation are the same. What you know is this. You're on a train in a country you can't mention, carrying a legend that belongs to an organization that officially ceased to exist before some of the people you passed on the platform today were born. And the organization's seal is tattooed somewhere behind your sternum, invisible, permanent, and absolutely not going away. You thought you left. You never left.
Nobody leaves. The train moves forward through the dark, and somewhere behind you, in a city that will forget you were ever there, the invisible machinery keeps running. It ran before you arrived. It will run after you're gone. And somewhere in its turning gears, in the spaces between what's documented and what's real, between the governments that show their faces and the ones that don't, somewhere in there, a decision you just made is already changing the shape of something you'll never be allowed to fully see. You close your eyes. Your call sign still fits. That might be the most dangerous thing you've learned all week.
The train keeps moving into the dark, but now you're no longer sure if you're the one making choices or just following them. The architect is gone dark, the directorate is awake again, and whatever truth you uncovered was only the surface of something deeper. And as the distance grows between you and everything you thought was real, one thing becomes clear. You were never outside the system, only placed where they needed you most. Unseen missions, where every story hides another layer you were never meant to see.